All right, we are back with H.G. Wells, The Time Machine. This is going to be part 13, chapter 11, The Palace of Green Porcelain. So they slept under the stars. He decided he's going to bring Weena back with him. He's decided that he's been on vacation for a while. He was kind of like a tourist in this distant land and all exploring and all happy. And now he has work to do. He's got to walk 18 miles. He didn't make it in one day. He had to sleep out under the stars. Didn't want to go through the woods. He lost his shoes. He needs weapons. He's like, I'm going to need weapons. I'm going to need a secure place to sleep. I need safety, right? He's looking at the hierarchy of needs, and he's like, I'm at the bottom, man. I thought I had it made. I thought I had all the food I could eat, all this beautiful fruit, and it's the land of utopia, and nobody has any worries. And now fear is coming back. The Morlocks, maybe they're eating the Eloi. Maybe he's wrong. He thinks that they are. Chapter 11, The Palace of Green Porcelain. I found the Palace of Green Porcelain. When we approached it about noon, deserted and falling into ruin. Only ragged vestiges of glass remained in its windows, and great sheets of the green facing had fallen away from the corroded metallic framework. It lay very high upon a turfy down, and looking northeastward. Before I entered it, I was surprised to see a large estuary, or even creek, where I judged Wandsworth and Battersea must once have been. I thought then, though I never followed up the thought, of what might have happened or might be happening to the living things in the sea. The material of the palace proved on examination to be indeed porcelain, and along the face of it I saw an inscription in some unknown character. I thought, rather foolishly, that Weena might help me interpret this, but I only learnt that the bare idea of writing had never even entered her little head. She always seemed to me, I fancy, more human than she was perhaps, because of her affection was so human. Within the big valves of the door, which were open and broken, we found, instead of the customary hall, a long gallery lit by many side windows. At first glance, I was reminded of a museum. The tiled floor was thick with dust, and a remarkable array of miscellaneous objects was shrouded in the same gray covering. Then I perceived, standing strange and gaunt in the center of the hall, what was clearly the lower part of a huge skeleton. I recognized by the oblique feet that it was some extinct creature after the fashion of the Megatherium. The skull and the upper bones lay beside it in the thick dust, and in one place, where rainwater had dropped through a leak in the roof, the thing itself had been worn away. Further in the gallery was the huge skeleton barrel of a Brontosaurus. This book was written back when Brontosaurus was real the first time, before they got rid of it and then realized that we are going to bring back Brontosaurus, and Brontosaurus is back. Okay. My museum hypothesis was confirmed. Going toward the side, I found what appeared to be sloping shelves, and clearing away the thick dust, I found the old familiar glass cases of our own time, but they must have been airtight to judge from the fair preservation of some of their contents. Clearly, we stood among the ruins of some latter-day South Kensington. Here, apparently, was the paleontological section, and a very splendid array of fossils it must have been, though the inevitable process of decay that had been staved off for a time, and had, through the extinction of bacteria and fungi, lost 99 hundredths of its force, was nevertheless, with extreme sureness, if with extreme slowness, at work again upon all its treasures. Here and there I found traces of the little people in the shape of rare fossils, broken to pieces or threaded in strings upon reeds. And the cases had in some instances been bodily removed, by the Murlocs as I judged. The place was very silent. The thick dust deadened our footsteps. Weena, who had been rolling a sea urchin down the sloping glass of a case, presently came, as I stared about me, and very quietly took my hand and stood beside me. And at first I was so much surprised by this ancient monument of intellectual age that I gave no thought to the possibilities it presented. Even my preoccupation about the time machine receded a little from my mind. To judge from the size of the place, this palace of green porcelain had a great deal more in it than the gallery of paleontology, possibly historical galleries. It might be even a library. To me, at least in my present circumstances, these would be vastly more interesting than this spectacle of old-time geology and decay. Exploring, I found another short gallery running transversely to the first. This appeared to be devoted to minerals, and the sight of black and sulfur set my mind running on gunpowder. But I could find no saltpeter. Indeed, no nitrates of any kind. Do you know how to make gunpowder and explosives out of nature? Doubtless they had deliquesced ages ago, yet the sulfur hung in my mind and set up a train of thinking. As for the rest of the contents of that gallery, though on the whole they were the best preserved of all I saw, I had little interest. I am no specialist in mineralogy, and I went down a very ruinous aisle, running parallel to the first hall I had entered. Apparently, this section had been devoted to natural history, but everything had long since passed out of recognition. A few shriveled and blackened vestiges of what had once been stuffed animals, desiccated mummies in jars that had once held spirit, a brown dust of departed plants, that was all. I was sorry for that, because I should have been glad to trace the patient readjustments by which the conquest of animated nature had been attained. Then we came to a gallery of simply colossal proportions, but singularly ill-lit, the floor of it running downward at a slight angle from the end at which I entered. At intervals, white globes hung from the ceiling, many of them cracked and smashed, which suggested that originally the place had been artificially lit. Here I was more in my element, for rising on either side of me were many of the huge bulks of big machines, all greatly corroded, and many broken down, but some still fairly complete. You know I have a certain weakness for mechanism, and I was inclined to linger among these, the more so as for the most part they had the interest of puzzles, and I could make only the vaguest guesses at what they were for. I fancied that if I could solve their puzzles, I should find myself in possession of powers that might be of use against the Morlocks. Suddenly, Weena came very close to my side, so suddenly that she startled me. Had it not been for her, I do not think I should have noticed that the floor of the gallery sloped at all. Footnote. It may be, of course, that the floor did not slope, but that the museum was built into the side of a hill. E.D. And the side just like this. Let me even show you. I don't know who's making footnotes. I doubt that the footnotes are the time traveler, because he's not the one telling the story. The narrator's telling the story. So maybe the narrator's Ed or Ed? I don't know. The end I had come in at was quite above ground and was lit by rare slit-like windows. As you went down the length, the ground came up against these windows until at last there was a pit like the area of a London house before each, and only a narrow line of daylight at the top. I went slowly along, puzzling about the machines, and had been too intent upon them to notice the gradual diminution of the light until Weena's increasing apprehensions drew my attention. Then I saw that the gallery ran down at last into thick darkness. I hesitated, and then, as I looked around me, I saw that the dust was less abundant and its surface less even. Further away toward the dimness, it appeared to be broken by a number of small, narrow footprints. My sense of the immediate presence of the Morlocks revived at that. I felt that I was wasting my time in the academic examination of machinery. I called to mind that it was already far advanced in the afternoon, and that I still had no weapon, no refuge, and no means of making a fire. And then, down in the remote blackness of the gallery, I heard a peculiar pattering, the same odd noises I heard down in the well. I took Weena's hand, then struck with the sudden idea. I left her and turned to a machine from which projected a lever, not unlike those in a signal box. Clambering upon the stand and grasping this lever in my hands, I put all my weight upon it sideways. Suddenly, Weena deserted the central aisle and began to whimper. A lot of things are happening very suddenly. I had judged the strength of the lever pretty correctly, for it snapped after a minute strained, and I rejoined her with a mace in my hand. More than sufficient, I judged, for any Morlock skull I might encounter, and I longed very much to kill a Morlock or so. Very inhuman, you may think, to want to go killing one's own descendants. But it was impossible somehow to feel any humanity in the things, only my disinclination to leave Weena, and the persuasion that if I began to slake my thirst for murder my time machine might suffer, restrained me from going straight down into the gallery and killing the brutes I heard. Well, mace in one hand and Weena in the other, I went out of that gallery and into another and still larger one, which at the first glance reminded me of a military chapel hung with tattered flags, the brown and charred rags that hung from the sides of it, I presently recognized as the decaying vestiges of books. They had long since dropped to pieces, every semblance of print had left them, but here and there were warped boards and cracked metallic clasps that told the tale well enough. Had I been a literary man, I might perhaps have moralized upon the futility of all ambition. But as it was, the thing that struck me with the keenest force was the enormous waste of labor to which the somber wilderness of rotting paper testified. Oh, this is like central to immoral what he's talking about. He's talking about he literally says, I would have moralized upon the futility of ambition. Ooh, and then what else? Waste of labor to which the somber wilderness of rotting paper testified. At the time, I will confess that that I thought chiefly of the philosophical transactions and my own 17th paper upon physical optics. Then, going up a broad staircase, we came to what may have once been the gallery of technical chemistry. And here I had not a little hope of useful discoveries, except at one end, where the roof had collapsed, the gallery was well preserved. I went eagerly to every unbroken case, and at last, in one of the really airtight cases, I found a box of matches. Very eagerly I tried them. They were perfectly good. They were not even damp. I turned to Weena. "Dance!" I cried to her in her own tongue, for now I had a weapon indeed against the horrible creatures we feared. And so, in that derelict museum, upon the thick, soft carpeting of dust, to Weena's huge delight, I solemnly performed a kind of composite dance, whistling "The Land of the Leal" as cheerfully as I could. I don't know that song, or else I'd whisper it. It's called "The Land of the Leal." In part, it was a modest can-can. In part, a step dance. In part, a skirt dance, so far as my tailcoat permitted. And in part, original, for I am naturally inventive, as you know. Now, I still think that for this box of matches to have escaped the wear of time for memorable years was most strange. As for me, it was most fortunate. Yet, oddly enough, I found a far unlikelier substance that was camphor. I found it in a sealed jar, and by chance, I suppose, I had been really hermetically sealed. I fancied at first that it was paraffin wax and smashed the glass accordingly, but the odor of the camphor was unmistakable, and the universal decay of this volatile substance had chanced to survive, perhaps through thousands of centuries. It reminded me of a sepia painting I had once seen from the ink of a fossil, belemnite, that must have perished and become fossilized millions of years ago. I was about to throw it away, but I remembered that it was inflammable and burnt with good bright flame. Inflammable means it lights on fire. Flammable also means it lights on fire. Was in fact an excellent candle, and I put it in my pocket. I found no explosives, however, nor any means of breaking down the bronze doors. Yet my iron crowbar was the most helpful thing I had chanced upon. Nevertheless, I left that gallery greatly elated. I cannot tell you all the story of that long afternoon. It would require greater effort of memory to recall my explorations in all the proper order. I remember a long gallery of rusting stand of arms, and how I hesitated between my crowbar and a hatchet or a sword. I could not carry both, however, and my bar of iron promised best against the bronze gates. There were numbers of guns, pistols, and rifles. The most were of masses of rust, but many were of some new metal, and still fairly sound. But any cartridges or powder there may have once been had rotted to dust. One corner I saw was charred and shattered, perhaps I thought by an explosion among the specimens. In another place was a vast array of idols, Polynesian, Mexican, Grecian, Phoenician, every country on earth, I should think. And here, yielding to an irresistible impulse, I wrote my name upon the nose of a steatite monster from South America that particularly took my fancy. You see graffiti on the gods, their idols. As the evening drew on, my interest waned. I went through gallery after gallery, dusty, silent, often ruinous. The exhibits sometimes mere heaps of rust and lignite, sometimes fresher. In one place I suddenly found myself near the model of a tin mine.
Combat Systems Casualty, loss is 5. Combat Systems Casualty,
Saw that
Combat
coming.
Systems Casualty, loss is 5.
In one place I suddenly found myself near the model of a tin mine, and then by merest accident I discovered an airtight case, 2 dynamic cartridges. I shouted "Eureka!" and smashed the case with joy. Then came a doubt. I hesitated. Then, selecting a little side gallery, I made my essay. I never felt such a disappointment as I did in waiting 5, 10, 15 minutes for an explosion that never came. Of course, things were dummies. I might not have guessed from their presence. I really believed that they had not been so. I should have rushed off incontinently and blown Sphinx bronze doors, and as it proved, my chances of finding the time machine altogether into non-existence. It was after that, I think, that we came to a little open court within the palace. It was turfed and had 3 fruit trees, so we rested and refreshed ourselves. Toward sunset, I began to consider our position. Night was creeping upon us, and my inaccessible hiding place had still to be found. But that troubled me very little now. I had in my possession the thing that was perhaps the best of all defenses against the Morlocks. I had matches. I had the camphor in my pocket, too, if a blaze were needed. It seemed to me that the best thing we could do would be to pass the night in the open, protected by a fire. In the morning, there was the getting of the time machine. Toward that, as yet, I had only my iron mace. But now, with my growing knowledge, I felt very differently toward these bronze doors. Up to this, I had refrained from forcing them, largely because of the mystery on the other side. They had never impressed me as being very strong, and I hope to find my bar of iron not altogether inadequate for the work. So he's in this whole museum of arms, and what he ends up with is he broke off a lever from a machine as an iron bar. And he thinks that A, it's the best weapon, and B, it's going to help me pry these doors open. What weapon would you have chosen if you had all the vast array of weapons before you and you were in his situation? He wanted a gun, but the bullets didn't work, so that wouldn't have worked, and he was probably not even going to use it as a gun. He was trying to use it to blow up the bronze door that he wants. He wants his time machine back. He's getting serious this time. He wasn't very nice to the Morlocks either. I think his open mind is kind of closing. Maybe the fear is getting the better of him. Are we sure that the Morlocks are bad guys? Do we know yet? What do you think? Do you think that they're the bad guys? I think that they're the bad guys. I don't know. Maybe they're not. Maybe they are. I don't think the Eloi are the bad guys. All right. That's it for chapter 11. Coming up next, chapter 12. There's only 16 chapters in the whole book. So we are this far done. This much left, this much read.